Go right into it. The PlayStation Network outage that happened over the weekend. There's no information yet on what actually was the cause of the PSN outage, but the PSN went out Friday, this past Friday on the, what was that, the 7th? No, not the 7th. Yeah, the 7th. Yeah, it went offline Friday the 7th and was restored a little under 24 hours after that. And what PlayStation is doing as a way to compensate the players who, everyone who is affected by this, is they are giving them an additional 5 days of PlayStation Plus service. But a couple things I want to note before I let you give your comments on this. For starters, this PSN outage actually made it so that people couldn't play, in many cases, their single-player offline games. Especially the digital ones. I'm not sure about the disc versions as well, but it did make it so that certain digital titles could not launch without internet access because it couldn't verify the license. And then it warns players that the game will close after 15 minutes due to being unable to verify the license. So I know this happened with at least one of the games I saw was Metaphor ReFantazio, that people couldn't play their digital copies, at least, of that. And yeah, so in addition to people, this also affected the Monster Hunter Wilds beta that was that weekend, because it couldn't go online at all. So there was no way for people to play it. And PlayStation still has not said to anyone why it went offline. I don't know. I'm brain dead. You can talk.
All right. So first off, Sony wanted to make PSN mandatory. Oh, yeah, that's another thing too for the game. Like you could play the games, but like if you were trying to use PSN on PC, you couldn't do it there either. And they wanted to make it mandatory on PC with your services going down. And thankfully it wasn't like it was back in 2011 when it was down for days. But at the same time, is PSN really that reliable to the point that you think you're good enough to enforce it to play your games on PC? Like make it mandatory for every game? No, I'm not. No, no, Sony, no. That's why we did not want you to make it mandatory for games on PC. And also, I think even on the console side of things, this really just enforces the reason as to why DRM is a bad thing. I mean, people say, "Oh, well, you got to deal with that stuff on, on PC, having to deal with the Nouveau." This essentially is what you get on PC, is the fact that you couldn't play your digital games because they couldn't check the licenses. That's DRM, essentially, more or less. And and also people say, well, you're always online with your console or your system, so it doesn't matter if there's DRM because you'll always be online, so it doesn't matter. Oh, well, guess if the servers go down, then you're out of luck. I mean, that's the same people who say like DRM is no big deal, except for when it actually goes and bites you in the butt, which is another reason why I'm always speaking out against DRM, because I'm like, DRM hurts the people who actually buy the games. It doesn't hurt people who pirate the games, because they're getting games without DRM in it and they're having a good time. People who buy the games, though, have to deal with the DRM. And I mean, sure, for games that are online multiplayer, I can understand not being able to play them because, you actually need to connect to the servers. But if you're playing single player games, there's no reason why you can't play the games in offline mode. Like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. So this really highlights the, I guess you could say, the incompetence that shows what happens when you implement this stuff, and when you're complacent and allow this to just persist continuously. But man, it definitely was a mess, though. Like, and I really want to know why Sony hasn't said anything as to why it's happening. Because I mean, is this something that happened on their end? Did someone do something where they, messed up the code or something like that? Were they hacked? Like Sony not actually saying what's going on is very interesting to me. Because I feel like most companies would have said something, saying like, "Oh, the reason why we had these outages was because of X, Y, or Z." But Sony hasn't said anything. Just saying like, "Oh, we're sorry that the services went down. Here are 5 extra days for you." So I really want to know what happened in the first place that caused PSN to go down. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I actually did see something where people were saying like, well, actually no, here's something I thought about. Also, the fact that PSN is a service you pay for, um, and yet it can go down like this. I mean, and people think that's fine. Whereas meanwhile, if I'm sorry, I don't pay for online on PC, and I'm not worrying about is my service going down or not. I mean, if my service is going down, it's because my internet's not working. It's not because of the fact that Steam is down, or I mean, you don't have to worry about GOG because that's built to be offline in the first place. So your games are fine if you're playing offline there. But if you're paying for a service, you shouldn't have to deal with this. Like, this is unacceptable, just to be blunt about it. And yeah, I mean, I really want Sony to say what the issue is, because I feel like not saying anything is worse than saying outright we were hacked or something like that. And again, it wasn't it was much shorter than the 2011 incident, but at the same time, being down for such a long period of time is kind of concerning, to say the least. And especially when you can't play your games the entire time, especially your single player games. Like, that's the worst part, is the single player games, because single player is meant to be played on or offline. I mean, granted, if it's single player, it's not online, but if you want to like connect to servers and do stuff, upload stuff, have stuff synced to the cloud, yeah, sure, fine. But you should be able to at least play the game offline. There's no excuse for that. So that's, again, another reason why you shouldn't need to have DRM in games, because they just hurt consumers. They don't do anything for us. They're not beneficial for our end. And people who say DRM is good, they really do not know what they're talking about. But that is just everything I have to say about that.
Sorry, just give me a second. I'm
no. I was like, I know he's gonna say something.
Thinking through where I'm starting. Okay, so for starters, paying for PSN, especially in a situation like this, you're paying for DRM. You're paying extra so that they can restrict you from playing your games. So that's definitely a problem. Even if you're not paying for PSN, and you can still be restricted from playing your games if PSN goes offline. That's not good. I don't think that there's any situation, apart from like the aforementioned online specific games, games that are online only, where it makes any sense for this to be a thing. Except that it literally just restricts you from playing your games if they go offline. Now, I've heard the argument that, oh, well, your internet goes offline. Occasionally, your internet will go down, or you'll lose water, or you'll lose electricity, whatever, and you're not, you're not making as big of a deal about it. And it's like, well, yes, because I'm paying, because utilities are not the same as paying to access the internet that I already pay for. Now, it's one thing when it's like, okay, my internet service goes down. It sucks, it's annoying, and I make sure that I get compensated when it goes out, especially when it's during the work week and I'm having to use a hotspot in order to be able to work. But even then, I'm still getting compensated for it. And I'm not paying extra on top of what I'm paying for. Like I'm getting compensated for the time I lost from that standpoint. But when you're paying for an extra service that prevents you from accessing your own internet on your device, it doesn't make sense. I'm not good at expressing this, and I realize that people who are okay with spending that kind of money, they're not necessarily going to fully understand, especially because I'm not doing a good job explaining it. But it's not something you should be paying for. It's not something we should have to pay for. Now, I understand PS Plus has its benefits in that you get games that you can play as long as you're still subscribed to the service. Okay. But when you're paying for the service and it's preventing you from being able to access some of your single player offline games, that's just not cool. I don't know how else to say it. I wish my brain was working better tonight because it just really isn't. There are other people who do a much better job explaining it than I do. But either way, it sucks that they did this, and that ultimately they're not really. I mean, giving an extra 5 days is not really going to help. It's not really going to make that much of a difference. And the fact is, you're still paying for a service that you didn't get to use. And instead of saving money, you're just being given something that doesn't cost Sony anything. I don't know. I wish my brain was just like normal today. I don't know what is the deal. I think maybe I just haven't spent enough time thinking through this particular one. Hopefully Sony will explain it, but I guess going back to the other thing here. The reality that Sony was asking PC gamers to sign up for PSN and trying to require it, which, I mean, thankfully they've been pulling back from that. Requiring PSN to be, requiring PC players to use PSN when PSN does go down like this sometimes. It's like, why are we having to use this thing? Why are we having to log into this service that's not secure from what we can tell? I mean, we don't know what, if any, information was compromised. Thankfully, the joke tweet of Concord being added to everyone's library wasn't actually true. But why would we want to have to use a service that is unsecure, especially when it comes to providing potentially like financial information and that sort of thing? I mean, I made sure to take any cards I had on PSN off a while ago after I got hacked one time. My PSN network account got hacked, and they ended up spending money on my card, and it just was like a big hassle dealing with all that and canceling cards and so on and so forth. And it was all because my account got hacked, and I have not had that happen with Steam. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's not as often. And the difference is Steam is also free. Steam is a free service, and it's a better service. And PlayStation, you're paying extra for it, and then you still end up with situations like this. Hopefully there will never be another situation like what happened in 2011, but even the fact that this happened was not good. So, I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
I think I have, or just like something that I've always said that just popped up in my mind as you were mentioning this earlier. Like, the thing about having to pay for PSN, and this also will apply to Xbox Gold as well, is the fact that you buy the consoles, then you buy the games, then you have, and of course you spend money on your internet service provider, whoever it may be, but then you have to spend extra money to use the features on the game that is online multiplayer and to use the internet, which you already pay for. So you're paying to use the things that you've already paid bought in the first place, which is the games. And in order to actually use the game to the fullest extent, you have to spend money to do that, which is if you're using PSN or Xbox Gold, which is, I think, ridiculous. And again, as you said, you don't have to deal with that on PC because, just playing the game online. It's a free service. So I think that it's just a ripoff. But, the fact that with PSN, possibly getting compromised and hacked is even worse than what you get with Xbox Gold, because at least that's secure at least.
All right. Any other thoughts on that?
No, sir.